You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
PackersTalk.com.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. I'm your host, Miles Tuddick, joined by your co-host, Tim Hamilton. We are diehard Packers fans who just love talking about the Pack, not getting distracted by all the national sports media nonsense. We are sticking to real football, talking about the top topics around the Pack every week, breaking down games during the season, and of course, now we're sorting through all the draft and dreams and drama of the offseason. If y'all want to support the pod, please spike that like button for us. Super easy to do. Next, jump on over to YouTube, type in Packers Talk Network. Network's important. And hit that little subscribe button for us. Little bell next to it. Those things are super helpful. Love you guys, all the subscribers hanging out with us every week on Monday night at 9:30. And we got some stuff to get into this week or this evening here. So first things first, we got the NFL Combine coming up. No secrets there. So we're going to get into a few of our guys to watch. The coaching staff is starting to round out a little bit. Not going to be happy about everything on there, I don't think. But we can make peace with it. How about that? And then, of course, there's some free agency rumors, suggestions, whatever you want to categorize those things as floating around. We'll bat those around a little bit, see what we think. But first, let's cover the business. We are once again sponsored by Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packers fans, as well as those Bucks tickets, Brewers tickets. Summerfest is coming up. Get those tickets. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. And remember, support all those local businesses, Wisconsin and otherwise. Tim, good evening, sir. How we doing?
Good evening. Doing okay. Missing football. First week without an actual game, and we are in the throes of the offseason, right?
Here it is.
Here it is.
Deep in.
Yeah, it sucks. You miss it already, right? Like, no Super Bowl, the playoffs. It's a long way away, but that's fine. We got plenty to talk about. From now until they're back on the field in August for the preseason, September for the real games, and Scouting Combine starts next week. Free agency's right after that. So it's going to be coming fast and furious.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it always happens quick, right? We start in this phase, and then the Combine sneaks up on us, and then the draft somehow sneaks up on us. We get a few things in between here and there with free agency and OTAs and all that. So, yeah, there's always something, man. There's always something going on, and there's plenty that the Packers have to figure out this offseason. We're not just sitting here with an offseason of, what do we do? What's going on? What's going to happen? There's decisions that do need to be made. And look, we're lucky, and I know maybe not everybody feels this way, but the Packers are always enjoyable or relevant or exciting to watch in the draft, right? You're not going to get a sleepy show. You're not going to get a boring draft. So there's always something to look forward to with that. You don't know what Goot's up to. He proved last offseason with trading for Micah Parsons that he'll do anything. So, from that perspective, I look at all of this and go, all right, like what's on the board, what would be fun to have, would be realistic to have. And, we try to figure out a few names that when you hear them on draft night, it's like, all right, well, look at that. We know who that is and why that name was called. But it's a long road, lots to figure out, lots of tape to watch. We're going to watch some tape, figure out if a guy is the right style or not. But yeah, and so the Combine tells us a lot. We learn, there's a bit of a filter, a physical ability filter, right? The RAS scores or RAS scores is what those are usually summarized as. Now, of course, they try to make it clear that teams don't use those RAS scores, although I think that's obvious that they would have their own metrics and frameworks to go by. But they probably resemble that, right? We can all witness patterns and trends and try to figure out, like, okay, well, it seems like there's a line here that these guys don't cross, and sometimes you figure those things out. So with the Scouting Combine, we figure out who the athletes are. We figure out, maybe who's more likely to be called than not with the Packers, and size sometimes has something to do with that. But yeah, so we got that to look forward to. But right now, the coaching staff is starting to get rounded out. Maybe some of the addition by subtraction that some folks were hoping for didn't happen. That's fine. Here we are. We do have a new receivers coach. I think that's a big plus. We talked a little bit about him last week. We don't have a new offensive coordinator. We do have a new QB coach. We don't have a new O-line coach. So, if we were to suggest which we would prefer, hey, you can keep the O-line coach and the offensive coordinator and lose the quarterback coach and receiver coach, or keep the quarterback coach and receiver coach and trade in for a new offensive coach, or offensive coordinator and O-line coach. Which would you have preferred?
Well, I wanted to see a change in offensive line coach. I just think the development there over the last couple of years is kind of stagnated, and they haven't been getting the most out of the guys that they've brought in, either through the draft or through free agency. So that was the big one. As far as their offense goes, and we can talk about LaFleur and his play calling, and how things can. Everybody thinks he needs some new ideas, and they need to bring somebody in from the outside and all that. But the issues that they've had on offense, which again, they're a top 10 offense, so let's remember that. We want to see consistency. We want to see those slumps that they had in November of last year. Several weeks there, it was hard for them to score points. We want to see consistency. It all stems from the offensive line and the play of the offensive line. To me, we can talk about injuries, and there were injuries throughout the season. Watson missed half the year. Jaden Reed missed most of the year. They lost Kraft, Zach Tom's injury. There were injuries, but it comes back to the play of the offensive line, and it was disappointing. Jordan Morgan playing guard when he should have been kicked out to tackle earlier, right? Preseason when he got that opportunity to play left tackle when Rasheed Walker was out. That was the best we saw of Jordan Morgan. He should have stayed there, but they moved him to right guard, and they kept him at right guard until he just was unplayable anymore. Then they finally made the change and brought Belton in. And that took too long, too, because Belton, they insisted, was a tackle, and they had never really tried him at guard through training camp in the preseason, right? So, everybody, why aren't you trying him at guard? Why aren't you, And then they didn't. And then we finally saw it in November, and yeah, he had his struggles, but you can see, the potential there for him at guard. And it was a mess. And whether it was veterans like Rasheed Walker, disappointing and having, underperforming, having a disappointing season, or an Aaron Banks, the big free agent signing, not playing well, playing through an injury, missing time with an injury, not developing your young players enough. I wanted to see a change in offensive line coach. Number one, that was, and special teams coordinator, which we've talked about a million times and we'll continue to talk about. But for me, they needed to make a change at offensive line coach one. As far as offensive coordinator goes, I understand the Stenavich issues, if you want to call it that, the questions about Stenavich and what his role really is, what he does, and do they need somebody with outside perspective, with a fresh idea? If they would have made a change there, or if he would have just moved on and gotten another job somewhere else, okay, I'm fine with that too. I'm not sure they would have brought somebody in from the outside. I always thought that was either Getsy or Vrabel that would have gotten the OC job anyway, so that wouldn't have given everybody their outside perspective that they wanted. But for me, I was more concerned about the play of the offensive line than the offensive coordinator itself. So
fair enough.
I'm happy they made it the receivers coach, and I know this was Mahaffey got hired by Sean Mannion in Philadelphia, but he was under contract, and that wasn't a promotion for him. So LaFleur could have very easily said, "No, you're not taking my guy." He allowed Mannion to leave. Now, was that him doing a favor to Sean Mannion? Maybe.
That Mannion also might the OC job, didn't he?
Mannion got promoted. Mahaffey didn't get promoted.
Oh, gotcha.
He went from a receivers coach to a tight ends coach, and they threw run game coordinator on it. But technically, that's a job that LaFleur could have blocked him from interviewing for and taken. He allowed him to leave. So is that LaFleur just giving Mannion a guy and like, hey, you want to take him? Cool. Like, we'll let you take him. Or is that LaFleur kind of saying like, I'm not sorry to see this guy leave. And now he's going to get out of his contract. They don't have to pay him his rest of his contract. Like, they're not firing him. Whatever it was, I'm fine with them bringing in a new wide receivers coach. I think it makes sense. I'm cool with that. But I would have liked to see change of offensive line, and then the quarterback coaching change. Replacing Mannion, who obviously got promoted. You weren't going to be able to keep him because he got an OC job with play calling duties. Good for him. Like, it was a promotion for him. Replacing with Getsy, and I know a lot of people were upset about that. You know what? Luke Getsy was the quarterback coach for 2 MVP seasons of Aaron Rodgers. He was the guy that, like, when LaFleur came in, Rodgers said, like, go get – and we don't have to take Rodgers' opinion on everything, right?
Hey,
but he wanted Getsy. Like, he recommended Getsy. And Getsy wasn't his quarterback coach before when he was originally in Green Bay on McCarthy. He was a receivers coach.
Right.
So Rodgers recommended him. LaFleur didn't have ties to Getsy. He hired him. Rodgers had 2 MVPs with Getsy as his quarterback coach. And he had work with Jordan Love and development with Jordan Love. And Jordan Love likes Getsy. So, yeah, it's not a fresh outside quarterbacks coach. Okay, be upset about that. And I know he didn't do a good job as offensive coordinator in Chicago or Vegas, but he didn't have a quarterback in either one of those spots. And those were bad spots, right? Bad offenses. Nobody, or I shouldn't say nobody, but most coaches probably wouldn't have succeeded in those situations. So I'm okay with
those are tough situations.
Right. I'm okay with Getsy as quarterbacks coach. But the position that
I don't think I'd be okay with Getsy as OC, but I'm with you on the quarterback coach.
Exactly. So I'm fine with him as quarterback coach. But the position that disappoints me that is going to remain the same is offensive line coach. I think they needed somebody fresh there. I think that's the position that they needed change. Now, they're keeping Butkus. If the offensive line performs better, great, cool. I'm fine with that. It's not, but it's just they haven't been able to develop the guys that they have drafted or brought in outside, and that's concerning. And I think that's the piece of the offense that's kind of holding them back from being a fully consistent unit offensively. It's just their offensive line underperformed in 2025, and they need to get better there. So that's why I wanted to see a change there.
Yeah, I agree with that. And part of my issue is attitude, and I think the offensive line is very capable of setting the attitude of, if not the offense, the team. But that's where it's like, okay, you're going to keep all that the same. The other part I have an issue with is the accountability. And the mistakes that were being made late in the season are just not mistakes that should be made if you prioritize accountability and not making those kind of stinking mistakes. Like there's a difference, right? Like I think what I said is I'll take the 15-yard penalty all day if you're over there defending your quarterback or another teammate from taking some kind of shady hit. Take it. In fact, you're going to get in trouble if you don't. You don't bring me a yellow flag after somebody, you go defend somebody, then you're in trouble for that. But on the other side of it, it's like, man, if we're deep into the season and y'all are making just mental errors, like, come on. That's just, and it's especially in crucial moments, you can't have that. That's the kind of crap that's just like, come on. No. And if you have accountability built into the thing, those are things that you can live with early on. But later on, like, no, man, like, that's like Belichick with running backs, man. As soon as a guy fumbled, his butt was coming off the field, and it didn't matter what name he had on his jersey. Like, if you fumbled that ball, you were coming off the field. You knew it. And those guys knew it, and they did not fumble that ball. Like, so it's just kind of a mentality thing, and that's what disappoints me. There's, I'm sure, some profile of things that says Luke Butkus is a great offensive line coach, and here's why we want to keep him. Great. But what I'm seeing is that lack of attitude and a lack of discipline, and that seems to be part of the issue across the team. So not that he has to take responsibility for that, but with a group like the O-line where you are capable of setting the tone for the team, and you're not doing that, that's a disservice to the team. That's the crap where it's like, all right, I guess we are signing up for some mediocrity then. But I'm not like a doom and gloomer, right? I'm not sitting here trying to say, oh, it's all over, that's it. But I would have preferred something different. Yeah, I would definitely have loved to see something different. And now we got to hope that we're wrong, which is awkward, but whatever. Yeah, I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I hope next season the O-line comes back and just looks phenomenal. Great. All right. Hey, credit where credit's due.
Yeah, and we'll be the first one to give the offensive line coach Luke Butkus credit, but it just seems like that line hasn't gotten better over the last couple of years, and it's trending downward instead of trending upward, and that's concerning. And the other way I look at it is you have to develop Jordan Morgan now at left tackle. Hopefully they keep him there, which is his natural position. And you got to develop Anthony Belton, who's going into the second year as a second-round pick. Those are 2 high draft picks that it's big development time for them. And then if they added a young center to the mix in the draft, like that falls on your line coach. Obviously in the player too, and you can throw the OC and the head coach, like all that, but you're primarily in that room with the offensive line coach. So those are big responsibilities and big investments that they've made, and it needs to get done, because to me, that's the part of the offense that's kind of holding them back from truly being an elite offense, is the play of the offensive line. It's not good enough. It's not consistent enough. And they're not developing their guys.
Well, and one thing about the O-line, and this is something that I think goes less than noticed by the average fan, is if you want the ball going downfield more often, which a lot of people want Jordan Love, and us included, to have the ball, want him to push it downfield, you need the offensive line. Because if he doesn't have 2 seconds, he's not getting the ball downfield. And in some cases he doesn't, right? So that's where it's like, yeah, you need more consistency from the line so that you know what time you have for developing plays and what you can use and what you really shouldn't use. Because there's going to be some of those that they try. It's going to take too long to develop, and they got to scrap it. And otherwise, would it be great? Do you have a great matchup with Christian Watson on insert DB? Maybe. But you can't, because you don't have enough time to get the ball to him. So that's the real thing that you're talking about as far as this group holding them back. And, we've got Josh Jacobs, and I'm grateful for that. So I'm not going to spend too much energy on this, but I'm pretty confident Josh Jacobs covers up for a lot of their incompetencies in the run game, and run blocking. There's not a whole lot of, and I guess maybe there is, because we weren't getting the run game going very much last year when you needed it. No. But Josh Jacobs is that good that you just want to see him run, and he does usually run well. And that takes that pressure off of the O-line, because their run blocking is not great. He's getting hit early, usually in breaking tackles, or, taking steps to make guys miss, stuff like that, where if you have a lesser capable back there, it's going to look different.
Yeah, I think that was a big part of it. Like the drop off in the running game. Yeah, Jacobs played with a bum knee for, the second half of that year or whatever, however many games it was. But the drop off was all year, and it wasn't Jacobs. It was the offensive line. I don't fault him for much of that at all. I fault the offensive line. So yeah, it's run blocking, like you mentioned, pass protection. I think they do a decent job of pass protect, but it's just consistently doing it. It's doing it against the better opponents. It's, the second half of the Bears game, they couldn't pick up blitzes, and it was kind of like the same blitzes over and over again. And even Matt LaFleur had pointed it out, like it wasn't like blitzes that they weren't prepared about. They just didn't pick them up for whatever reason. And you could see by going back and looking at the film, a lot of that was Rasheed Walker, who's a veteran who should know better, right? And shouldn't be full. And I know he's not going to be here next year, so. But it's just, that's concerning. But the run blocking was an issue all season. When Jacobs was healthy, when he was playing with a bum knee, it just wasn't there. And they have to get better at that, because obviously Matt wants to run the ball a lot, and off of the running game, he wants the play action to be effective. So, yeah, it's all the way around. So that's why it was so obvious to me, at least, that they needed to do something different, the offensive line coach. Like, yes, it's on the players. They have to play better. I get that. There's accountability there, but you need better coaching. And it wasn't a 1 year, like, okay, they had a down year, but they were really good the year before. It's been a downward trend for the offensive line. They need to improve. And that, to me, that was the move, replacing the offense. Like, if you would have said, what coach do you want to see replaced this offseason, it would have been make a change in offensive line coach. Would be number one for me.
Yeah. Well, that's not the wish we got, so
Nope.
we'll roll with what we got. We did keep DC in town. DC will not become a DC this year. DeMarcus Covington, the D-line coach. He interviewed, I think it was Vegas, maybe, and then some others.
Yeah,
He had two interviews
the
at
Jets.
least.
The Jets, I think, interviewed him,
Jets?
and
Okay.
there might have been another one in there, but definitely Vegas and the Jets.
So he was definitely a threat to be lost, and we did not lose him, so that's great. He stays in town. I think that's, in my opinion, I think he's a much better D-line coach than what you had before, and if Devontae Wyatt stays healthy, we could probably have a better conversation about what he accomplished with this group. But even the guys, it's not that they did great or they did horrible. They didn't do terrible, right? The guys that were behind Devontae Wyatt, there's a lot of youth there, a lot of rookies and that kind of thing. So I'm very interested to see what he does with year 2 with this group. I think there should be probably more of an impact than there was in year 1 and getting Devontae Wyatt back. So I'm glad that you get that continuity with the D-line, him still being there. I think we're going to see some improvement from those guys across the board. And he's a good one that if you're going to bring in a young D lineman, that he gets his hands on him first. So I was happy to see him stay. What are your thoughts?
No, I am too. I was happy to see him stay as well. And he's the only position coach that is staying on the defensive side. How do you feel about that? Like, because obviously they, Hafley got a head coaching job. He took Duggan as a promotion to DC, so they couldn't block Duggan from going. But they let Downer leave. Whatever happened with Ainsley, that was weird. It never came out that they fired him, but he
seemed to not be happy about the other guy that they hired.
Well, yeah, I mean, they hired Babbage, who basically took his title. So, so did they let Ainsley out of his contract? Did Ainsley want to go because he didn't get the DC job? Like, that was a weird one. So you bring in Babbage, you bring in Bullocks to coach in the secondary too. Will probably do the safeties. New linebackers coach. The only position coach that's left is Covington on the line. So, they basically replaced the entire defensive staff other than the D-line coach. It's a lot of change. How do you feel about that, though?
Well, I think having continuity with the D-line coach is super important, and maybe the most important, because the rest of it really does have to respond to the defensive coordinator. If your scheme is going to change, which we don't really understand if it will, how much it will, and what that will look like. But if your scheme's going to change, then the position coaches really probably should be picked by the defensive coordinator that's bringing in the new scheme. So that to me makes sense, right? So there could be an upside with the continuity if you keep all of these guys and just bring in a new DC, but then you end up with a situation where a lot of the position coaches are learning alongside of the players instead of a DC bringing in guys that are like, hey, look, I know you know this. I know you know this. Let's put that to work here. So I'm not too worried about it. I think it's the right way to do it. And I do like the assistants they brought in. I think the guys they hired are solid. I think they bring good attitude and good football IQ. And again, I think keeping DeMarcus Covington is that's a good one, because the D-line's assignments don't change quite as much as everybody else's. So keeping continuity at that position, I think, is very helpful and will help those guys that are going from year 1 to year 2, especially. But that doesn't bother me as much. They were a good defense. Hafley was a good coordinator. He had good guys around him. We can't be surprised by that. We just got to hope that LaFleur understands how to replace that. That's what we're really learning now. And when he hired Hafley, he had the luxury of basically being at rock bottom. We really couldn't have gotten worse than Joe Barry. I say that, knocking on wood and all that, but going from Joe Barry to next coach was pretty likely to be a step up. They're really the percentage was strong. Now the bar's been set pretty high, right? So like you're not necessarily guaranteed to find somebody better than Hafley. You're hoping you find someone as good. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
But odds might not be in your favor for that. You know what I mean?
Right. I like the fact that these guys have experience out. Like, so everybody wants experience, like fresh ideas, not promote from within. Let's get guys from the outside. Well, they did that on defense. None of these guys are like promoted from within. And you got Babbage. Babbage was a defensive coordinator. Honestly, like if that would have been their hires defensive coordinator, I would have been like, okay, I can see that. Right. He interviewed with him.
That was a solid hire, man. I thought that was great.
Yeah. He interviewed with them, back before they hired Hafley. So he's got experience. Bullock's coaching the safeties. He's been a long time safeties coach with the 49ers. The linebackers coach was with Gannon in Arizona. Then he went off and he was a DC in college. And now Gannon's got him back. Like, these guys have experience in different systems. They have experience calling, two of them do have, and Covington too is a 1-year defensive coordinator. So 3 of them have experience as coordinators. So like, you got a lot of experience there. Gannon was a head coach and a coordinator. So I like that. I like that perspective they can bring. And, this isn't promoting your assistant offensive line coach to be your receivers coach like they did with Mahaffey. Like you're getting guys that have coordinator experience or long-time position coach experience and bringing it in. So I like that. It's a little risky because you had Hafley's system in place for 2 years and we like Hafley and what he had accomplished and how much of an improvement that was over Joe Barry. But obviously when Hafley leaves, there's going to be turnover. And, when Barry came in, not to like defend Joe Barry, but like he didn't bring in any of his own guys. Like they basically kept the rest of the staff and all right, Joe Barry, you're the DC. And Hafley came in and they made changes. And I think that's the better way to go. Like if you're going to bring in this defensive coordinator, let him bring in some of his own people. Obviously the linebackers coach was. I don't think Babbage. I think Babbage was more of a floor hire, but that's fine. But like let him run his own show, right? So they're going to do that with Gannon, and I like the guys they brought in. So yeah, I defensively, I don't think they needed to change as much as they did, but they kind of were forced to, and that's fine. And I think the guys they replaced them with, I'm happy with. I'm optimistic about it.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. So that was, I thought, kind of business as usual to be expected. But I thought the changes they made, they did the best they could with them. I'm pretty happy about all of them. Don't really have any complaints yet. But
we will complain now.
But Steno doesn't land a play calling job. Now, the guy who was the quarterback coach underneath him gets hired as a play caller before he does. That's kind of an indictment, man. Like, is this a good thing that we just don't know what Steno does, or is that starting to put him in the Eric Bieniemy camp?
That's a good question, and it's eye-opening. Like Mannion's only been on the job for 2 years, and really like 1 year as the quarterbacks coach. The year before, he was kind of learning under Tom Clemens, and he gets a job already. And like they didn't even interview. The Eagles interviewed a ton of guys. They couldn't get anybody to take the job, and like Mannion was kind of like late to the party. They didn't even interview Stenovich, and I believe Stenovich's only interview was down in Tennessee with Saleh, and I don't know if he was ever really a true candidate. And it's weird because previous years he had gotten interviews. Like he interviewed for Seattle's job last offseason. So like it could have been him instead of Clint Kubiak there. And he's had head coaching interviews. This year, nothing. So is that an indictment of Stenovich? Is it an indictment of what they think of the Packers staff? Like maybe, I don't know how in-depth the people doing the interviews are looking at teams. Like they should be really digging into it, but you can tell sometimes by who gets hired where they're not doing their research on some of these guys. So maybe they just look at it and be like, well, the Packers lost, and they lost 5 straight games to end their season. They weren't really that good, and Floor calls the plays, and we don't know Stenovich, and maybe that's why he's not getting recognized. It's just like the unknown of it. Like if the Packers would have went on a deep playoff run, then their coordinators would have been wanted by everyone. That happens every year. The teams that go deep, Clint Kubiak gets a job, right? Like you see that every year. The teams that go far in the playoffs, their coaches are wanted elsewhere, and the Packers haven't done that the last 2 years. So maybe that's a part of it. But you're right. Like Mannion gets an OC job before Stenovich. I mean, Stenovich has an OC, but he's not calling the plays. So
right.
Like,
and again, it's not like Mannion's been hanging around out there for very long. He's still pretty new on the job. So yeah, like
when or if Stenovich gets his shot to call plays, like I don't know. And as part of that, like just because he was an offensive line coach and he wasn't a quarterbacks coach, because everybody wants a quarterbacks coach to an OC, like, and I get that because the quarterback's the most important. So maybe that hurts Stenovich too. But then you see, Seattle yesterday, they just hired a new OC and they hired a tight ends coach from their 49ers. Right. So I guess it's not everybody, but there's some things working, I think, against Stenovich that maybe aren't in his control, but
sure.
Then the Eagles did pick somebody from the Packers staff that was a quarterback.
That's what I mean. It's like,
so it's, yeah.
You could say, well, we don't know much about Steno, but it's like, well, they know enough about Mannion.
Right. So. What do you know about Mannion? Yeah, he was a backup quarterback for some teams, and coaches spoke highly of him, but
it's not like he's Peyton Manning,
Right. And it's a big step up for that. And I mean, we're seeing some guys along those lines that are like getting the coaching and, moving up the ranks pretty quickly now. But yeah, it doesn't look good for Stenovich, certainly. So I don't know. I still think if we're sitting here next year and they have like a top 5 offense and they win a few playoff games or the Super Bowl, hopefully, I think he's going to be getting interviews again. I think that's part of it. But if he's not, then that's telling you what you need to know right there.
Yeah, but I mean, I think what you're arguing, though, is kind of beside the point, right? It's like the point is they haven't been going deep, and Mannion got the call, right? This is a guy who hasn't been on the job very long and doesn't have the position or responsibilities in theory that the offensive coordinator does. And Steno's been on the job for a few years now. You got some data. You do have some data there. So that's where I kind of go, I don't know, man. Like, you're right. Like, if they go on a run, people are going to want him, but that might not be the correct reason to want him. It's not because you've heard that he's some up and coming whiz like what Mannion is supposedly. So that's where I'm kind of, my eyebrows raising, my leash is shortening. Like the more we see of Steno or, whatever the offense is, it's like at some point you got to decide where you're going to give credit. And I think you have to give most of the credit to LaFleur, right? It's his offense.
It is.
He's the one who, came in, changed things around and got, a couple MVP seasons out of Aaron Rodgers, and now has molded Jordan Love. You can't give Steno that credit. So if you're going to give credit to LaFleur, you can't, unless you can see what you're giving Steno credit for, you can't really give him credit for the good things. So to sit here and say, well, offense isn't bad. It's like, yeah, it's not bad because LaFleur is running the show. It's not bad because Steno is running the show. And that's where I look at this and go, okay, so if this is just sort of an empty piece on the board, like you could benefit from a not empty piece on the board. But clearly this is what LaFleur prefers. I mean, there's policy's going to say what he's going to say. He's going to defend his guys as he should. But if we're looking at a meter of like hot seat meter or closeness to losing your job meter, the whole group is closer to losing their job after this season. You're not there. Clearly you didn't lose your job, but you're closer. You're certainly closer. You didn't get further from it because you didn't go further, and you definitely had some black eyes, we'll call them, with the meltdowns in the fourth quarter. So you got closer to getting fired. Now, I believe that they're aware of that. I believe that they can acknowledge, hey, We got to do better than that. And if we don't, we may not have a job in the near future. So knowing that, this is who LaFleur is surrounding himself to bet on himself. Or surrounding himself with to bet on himself. So it's like, all right, dude. If that's what you think your best foot forward is, let's see it. But it's hard. It's kind of like I haven't been able to get this out of my head since I saw it. Darn you, Andy Herman. It's kind of like Andy Herman comparing Goot's draft picks to the consensus board and then realizing, like, dang, man, there's some pretty solid misses on there. You could have made some, with the consensus board, you could have made some better picks for sure. So it's hard to not feel the same way sitting back here going, LaFleur, I get it. He's your guy. But boy, from my view, you could do a lot better to have somebody else in that seat. And if you're going to bet on yourself, which is what you're doing, it's hard to watch him not put what you think is his best foot forward. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. It's hard for me to watch that. Is it the worst? No, because to your point, the offense is still good, right? It's just like, what could be, though? What could be with one other brilliant mind in the room? And again, not even to say that Steno's not brilliant, just somebody who's naturally got more experience and knowledge. We've beat that one a lot, so we won't go too deep into it. But
right,
I've said my piece. Do you need to counter me? Do you need a counter perspective? So no. You're usually a little bit more defensive of Steno than I am.
Yes, that's true. Well, you're usually much more. I don't want to say angry, but you're much more passionate about your distaste for Stenovich. And we don't truly know what he does, right? Like I can't judge him and say he's a good offensive coordinator or he's a bad offensive coordinator. I don't have enough information to say that. Now, is that a bad thing this many years into his 10 years offensive coordinator? Yeah, maybe. But it's because he doesn't call plays. And like, that's so much of what we see from most, from the offensive coordinators that do call plays or from the head coaches that call plays like LaFleur. So we don't truly know. And I will say when he was in the offensive line room as just the offensive line coach, that offensive line performed better and developed better than it has since he's become open. Now, is part of that on him as the offensive coordinator? Sure. And it's part of that on LaFleur? Yes. It's not just a Butkus issue. So, yeah, I'm not going to sit here and like defend Steno to you again. I'll just say like we don't truly know. But it certainly doesn't look good that a guy that was a position coach on the same staff as him gets a play calling offensive coordinator job before he's ever had one. Like it's interesting. Now, does that mean that like if Steno ever gets that he won't be good at it? No, we have no way of knowing what he would be as a play caller, as a head coach, whatever his next step would be. We don't know. But yeah, it's interesting that the opportunities this year really weren't there for him. And somebody else on staff had an opportunity and got promoted before Stenovich. So we'll see how it plays out. But looking at it from that perspective, it doesn't look good for Stenovich.
Right. Well, we'll see how it plays out. Like to the point, like the offense is still good, and you're at the point where Jordan Love is good enough that he's not necessarily going to need anybody to help him be good. It's more like what we're talking about, like turn the guy loose. And so there's plenty of room for optimism around the offense. And the other thing is, the players are going to develop. The players are going to get faster, stronger, bigger this offseason, smarter, more comfortable within
healthier,
the system, all of that, healthier.
Just
the players get better in the offseason. They do. So especially the young guys. And you got a lot of young guys that are still taking meaningful steps forward. So that's the other thing to look forward to. And maybe the thing to look forward to the most about the offense is the players becoming a little bit more self-driven and not needing the coaching. So if I had to make a case for Steno and the counter perspective there to myself, it would be the continuity that these coaches know these players and that they understand and trust them and they're ready to turn them loose. All right, cool. I'll hear that. I think there's something to that. There could be some benefit there. I hope that that's how it turns out, but we'll see. you want to see things that are mistakes get corrected. You hope that that'll happen. And so far, it doesn't seem like that's what's happening, but we could be wrong.
Yeah, and I think the offense is still good. The offensive line, number one, needs to be better. They need health. They didn't all of last season. They didn't really play with Watson, Reed, and Tucker Kraft all healthy at the same time. Like,
right,
that's big. You lose Zach Tom late in the year. That was huge, and he really played through injuries all year. Jacobs played through an injury, and like he never really had anybody. So and that was part of the consistency issues. And I know they went through that slump where they couldn't score against Carolina and the Eagles, and it was like, what the hell's happening? And then they seemed to get out of it, and then they fell into like we can't play a complete game. We're blowing second half leads where we get up on Denver, we get up on the Bears, and then like it falls apart in the second half. Right? We can't protect in the second half, and So I think it's health, it's improved play and development on the offensive line, and it's consistency from your guys. But it's there, and if they're healthy, they're going to be better. And then just you need improvement up front, but they're still a good offense. And your disappointment with Stenavich, my disappointment with Butkus being back. We'll see how it plays out. Obviously, we don't think it was the right way to go. But if they could just get their guys healthy and playing consistently, it's going to make that coaching look so much better.
Yeah, agreed. A little health goes a long way. But they're also going to add some players. I know that it's a little bit of a dark cloud that we don't have a first-round pick, and a lot of people like to boo-hoo about that. But those same people will talk about how Goot can't draft very well in the first round. So it shouldn't matter that we don't have a first-round pick. But if it does matter to you who we pick first in the second round, welcome to the show. Starting off with R. Showers, good to have you, sir. He said, let's get Covington a huge early down anchor. He seemingly did a decent job. Yes, I agree. And I think that there are several options for that to be watching. And so the thing about the combine, and we've seen this happen, it doesn't happen for everybody. It happens for some guys. The headlines are the ones who put up big numbers, and they do gain a lot of draft stock from that, right? Nicky Manwari last year is a good example. DK Metcalf is a good example. There's a lot of guys that they put up those big numbers and they land themselves a higher draft pick. And when Micah Parsons ran as fast as he did, I know he turned a lot of heads and probably went from a top 20, 30 pick to a top 10 pick, right? So there's a lot to be gained here from the combine. We start to see who does what. Now, so there might be some guys right now that look like they're within range for the Packers that could change, right? You see a guy like a Darrell Jackson Jr., Florida State interior D lineman, massive dude that a lot of people have been talking about. He had a great Shrine Bowl and decided he was bored, so he went on over to the Senior Bowl and had an interest. I think he had a pretty good performance there too. He at least had good practices. I didn't catch the game. But yeah, I mean, he's just a huge human, 6'5", 330, maybe 340, if he's 330, he's not less than that. So he's a big dude and plays with explosiveness and speed. If that guy comes out and runs some kind of wild, mind-blowing 40, you're probably not talking about the Packers being able to get him, So there's things like that where, you got to keep your eye out on the combine because it could weed a few guys out. It could also keep a few guys in the consideration as far as their athleticism and size goes. I know that DBs are kind of a controversial one for the Packers because Goot will not draft guys that are a certain size or smaller. And some of those guys end up playing pretty well in the NFL. Not all of them. I think he's right about a lot of them. But yeah, so we'll learn about a lot of that. We'll get some official sizes, some official measurements, and the scouting combine will really start to shape the radar of who the Packers are considering. But yeah, so, Darrell Jackson's one of my first ones. Tim, do you have any names that you're looking at or interested in for the combine?
Well, I just think the combine in general, I think it's more important what they do, I guess, off the field than it does as so much in the workouts, like how they measure. Like you get actual height and weight, and they probably already have most of that because some of these guys have been at the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Bowl or they're able to see him on campus and they get official measurements. And then their testing numbers are really important because that adds into the athletic scores. And whatever Green Bay uses or other teams use, like it might not be as easy, as straight up and as the RAS scores that we see, but it's something similar. And they're using those scores. I think that's really important. And then the medicals that we don't know about. Now, a lot of that ends up getting leaked out, especially as the whole draft process goes along and you see, find out who's hurt or who's dealing with potential long-term injury. That's big. And then the interviews, which we really don't know much about. I think that's the biggest part, more than how they work out on the field, is the actual numbers of it. And from Green Bay's perspective, I don't think they're going to make drastic changes to their board based on, how somebody's catching the ball through drills or stuff like that. But they will make some changes based on what their jumps are and their agility drills and stuff like that, is because it's going to back up, hopefully, what they're seeing on tape. So that's the important parts of it. To go back to your point, Darrell Jackson's one, that's a good name. He's had a really good offseason between the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl. He's at a position of need. He's got great size, long arms. He fits the profile of kind of what we're hoping. I think as most Packer fans are hoping the Packers are going to be looking for. They need defensive tackles. They need defensive tackles at size. We want them to be able to, play all three downs, but if they're, good run defenders who are developing as pass rushers, I think that's a good place to start, because that's what they need. That they need somebody that can click next to Devontae Wyatt. So Jackson's a good one. Lee Hunter's another one. The kid from Iowa State, Dominique Orange, I kind of like him just for his nickname, Big Citrus. I don't know, enough about him to say if he's quite a Packers guy, but just based on the nickname, I'll take Big Citrus.
Heck yeah,
I think there's a few of those guys, and a lot of times defensive tackles too. It's how does the league view them? If they view them as pass rushers, those guys are going to go earlier. But if there's questions about how much pass rush you're going to get, if they're primarily going to be rundown guys, are they ever going to develop as defense? Then I think you can get those guys on the third day sometimes, and they can come in and help you. But obviously, defensive tackle, cornerback, offensive line, those are the three primary positions that I'm interested in seeing how these guys measure up size-wise, what their RAS scores are going to be, because I think those are the three biggest areas of need. Defensive tackle, or really, you could throw edge rusher in there too, because that's a need. Cornerback and offensive line. So, it's always interesting to see what the receivers run and how they measure up, and I think the Packers can take another receiver here. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Looking forward, because they got a lot of contracts that are coming up, especially next offseason. But primary for what their needs are this offseason, it's defensive tackle, quarterback, offensive line. That's what I'm watching at the combine.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people would agree with that. But yeah, and a couple comments are coming in here that I think are solid. Brian Maffey hanging out with us says Thad Dixon needs to be on the watch list. Very Packersy. That one, DB out of UNC, he's one of those that is on the line, because I think he weighed in at 185 is what I've got on here. So I think the line that at least fans have observed, we won't suggest there's an official line, but I think it's 190 that they just won't go below. There's always a first, man. I would have bet a lot of money against him trading for Micah Parsons last offseason, despite how much I joked about it happening leading up to that. So yeah, he is one of those good DB. Definitely we'll probably talk a little bit more about him when we cover the corners.
Yeah, we should. And that's the other thing, is they have these thresholds, which you can debate them whether it's right or wrong or whatever, but they do stick to them. And it's kind of predictable now, because there's so many people, Packers fan, whatever we want to call ourselves, podcasters, fans, that follow this. And we kind of know what the thresholds are, and they won't come right out and say it, but it's been proven as far as who they're going to take, who they're not going to look at. And a lot of times they are right, but it does eliminate good players. And just to throw a name out there, D'Angelo Pons, the cornerback from Indiana, who looks so good for Indiana this year.
That's one I was going to bring up.
Man, he's a football player. Like, put him at
Yeah.
nickel. He'll stick his nose in there and tackle. He's always around the ball. But he's 5'9", 170 some pounds.
Yeah.
They ain't drafted.
Not on the radar.
Like, so, you know, he might have a really good career and he could be one of your draft crushes, but he's not going to be a Packer. Not to be a smart ass, but like, they're not going to look at it. They're not going to take a corner that size.
No.
So I think this, like, part of the combine and then pro day workouts and all that, like, it really helps as fans for us to kind of like narrow the board down to like the guys that they will actually be interested in and potentially have on their boards. So like, you know, you have this big combine where there's 300 some people at it, but like it's only a small portion that they're really going to have on their board. And now with the measurements and stuff coming in, it allows you to narrow your focus to actual guys that would be Packers picks.
Yeah, and I think it is a lot of that is for us. You know, Brian's got another comment here. Combine workouts don't affect teams' boards, interviews, and medicals do. Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't know if like you can throw a total blanket on that statement, but I think it's a fair statement to say it's more for us. It kind of illuminates things for us, you know, and we learn who's fast and who's not sometimes because speed can be very different in the pads on the field in a good and a bad way, right? So it can be harder to tell who's fast on the field. And the other thing you get is acceleration numbers. I actually think those end up being more important than the overall like 40. It's like, you know, a lot of the guys will have very similar 10-yard split times at like 1.54 range. And every now and then you see one at like a 1.49. That's fast. That's acceleration to top speed much quicker than somebody else is getting to top speed. So even if their top speed is faster, it usually isn't going to matter because you're most of the time not going to have 40 yards to get to your top speed anyway. So those are the things. And again, I think it more illuminates those things for us. I think most of the scouts and the GMs already have those things clocked and figured out. And they probably get data from the universities, from the college teams that we don't get regarding size and some of these other things. So yeah, I totally respect that it's not necessarily changing a whole lot for teams, but again, it illuminates those things for us. So if, for example, if we are keeping track of trends and patterns of our own team, like the Packers, and we notice that they just never draft a cornerback below 190 pounds, and then you get some of these official weights and a guy comes in at like 175 or 180, it's like, yeah, pretty safely you can assume he's not going to be on the radar. Now, if there's a guy that's like, well, you know, sometimes he's 190, sometimes he's 187. Yeah, it's all right. Well, maybe he is on the radar. Maybe the film, you know, he just jumps off the tape. You could see sort of a bend in trend, but that's where it's like you kind of have to draw your line as a fan for who you're going to pay attention to and get your hopes up for, expectations for. Just try to gauge those things. It might help your fan experience, right? If you're hoping for Pons to get drafted by the Packers, you're going to be disappointed, I think.
Yeah, don't get your hopes up. And there's a bunch of quarterbacks. Like look at the weigh-ins this week. Like there's a bunch that are in that like right around 190 pounds, maybe 195. Dixon was brought up already. The kid from South Carolina, Sissy, or however you pronounce it, Ohio State's Davison Igbinosun, I'm probably killing his name. He's right in that. Keith Abney at Arizona State. Malik Muhammad, Texas. They're all kind of like right in that 190-ish range. So like, what are they going to weigh at the combine? But then you kind of get it, like, and Green Bay has this information probably already. We don't as a public, but like, what did they play at their schools, right? Because that'll tell you. Like, they might come in here and they're 195 pounds, but like, the coaches will tell you, yeah, nah, during the season he was playing at like 183. Like, that's truly what he is, and they bulked up for the combine. Or it could be the other way around. Like, the dude lost a lot of weight so he could run a faster 40, but like during the regular season he was a $194, like, and that would be fine for them. Right. But like, yeah, that's the stuff that we don't have the privilege of seeing, but we are gonna obviously be able to have the information on what their weights are, and not only weights, but like they like them at a certain height. It's got to be over 5'10 3/4.
Yeah, basically nobody under 5'11, probably not even 6 foot.
They stretched it. They stretched it for Jair, and Good even admitted that. But like, they're not gonna that was a special instance.
And he ended up being the guy worth doing that for, right? He's a special player when he was healthy. But yeah, so those are the things that, it's not necessarily groundbreaking for the teams. I do think some guys probably come out and perform in a better way than what is expected. So there's probably some movement that's possible there. But I think a lot of the teams will tell you this. If you can interview a GM or a scout, they're going to tell you that the tape matters the most. And as it should. It definitely should. But then you've got, like your old Al Davis influences where you just knew whoever the fastest guy was, the Raiders were going to draft him. That's all that mattered. Who's the fastest? We're going to go get that guy. And if big and fast, that's what we're looking for. So every now and then you get that, right? That influence that comes in from left field, but I don't think that that's the norm. So yeah, and the other thing is, for me at least, it's you get a little bit more, you get a little closer to the truth at the combine. Whereas like a Diego Pavia might be listed at 6'1" on the roster at Vanderbilt, right? But we all know he ain't cracking 6 foot. So it's stuff like that where the truth will come out and you get to kind of understand who stands where. And it's less about like, well, this guy put on some, lost some, whatever. I think some guys, you get a little bit of stretching that truth on those rosters.
Oh yeah, wasn't Pavia wasn't he like 5'9" or 5'10" at the Senior Bowl? That's crazy.
Yeah.
But and the thing is, like, most teams in the NFL probably already knew that, but it's Vanderbilt's going to put it out there like that. But if you have access to it, like the scouts should, like they probably already knew that behind the scenes. But it's just crazy how some of these guys will be pumped up.
Well, and here our friend Brian chiming in again says NFL teams get measurements over the spring from NFS and Bledsoe. I usually get them from a source. Ooh, hey man, we got a little insider. Appreciate you, Brian. Yeah, so let's link some little insider info over here every now and then. But yeah, that makes sense. You get that information, and it's probably true information. So the media gets to play with our speculation and have fun, and everybody always knew that Kyler Murray was shorter than they thought. So Diego Pavia is the same way. But good question here from our Showers says, does a pro ever run a 40 again after the combine and pro day? Is that ever done at a team facility? Never heard of it. They maybe do in the off season as a measure and like a benchmark for progress, but that's not even like an official team capacity thing. That's something that they would do at like a training facility. You run a 40 at the beginning of the off season, you run halfway through, and then you run at the end, and hopefully you see some improvement on that. But outside of that, no. And you'll never see one published. You'll never see any of that information published. So it doesn't really matter because once you're in the league, you're in the league. Like, are you good or not? Guys like Jerry Rice is always the best example. Guy ran a 4.7 at the combine. He's still the greatest receiver of all time, and it's not even close. And if you actually go back and watch him, you youngsters that like to talk crap online, you can't argue with it. Like, the guy was just amazing. He separated out of his routes. He was if he was running a 4.7, everybody else was running slower than that. So maybe the pads made it different. I don't know. But that's the whole thing. It's like, once you're there, and you put up or shut up, and usually the guys with the most impressive measurables aren't actually the most impressive players. Like every now and then you get the Megatrons of the world coming in and just like, sheesh, and you're just physically dominant. But for the most part, like a guy like Davante Adams, he ran a 4.5. That's not getting anybody's attention at the NFL Combine if a receiver runs a 4.5. Phenomenal receiver. Going to be one of the best of all time, right? Like that's what he's shooting for. And I think our buddy Matthew Tan, I think you were asking about Davante Adams in the comments earlier. I think he has strong intentions of retiring a Ram. He might do the whole one-day contract thing with the Packers, but I don't think he's going to play anywhere else than LA at this point.
Yeah, he's under contract. He's not coming back.
Yeah. So while it would have been nice, that would have been last offseason would have been the time for that. But yeah, so we get to nerd out about the scouting stuff when it's happening because it's all we have. This is all we have. We must appreciate these little morsels of new football information that we can get. And, every now and then you learn something that makes sense. And later on, you're like, oh, shoot, we were right about that. That was fun. Most of the time you're wrong and it's fine. But, that's what we're here for. We get to speculate and bat things around and talk a little crap in the offseason. But I'm going to fly through a couple more names, a few more than a couple, a few more names to keep an eye on. And these are not top of the board names. These are guys that are going to be around when the Packers are picking or could trade into the area that these guys would be in. So we mentioned Darrell Jackson earlier. Mason Rager from Wisconsin is one that I'm really interested in. And I am a Badger fan, so there's a little bit of bias built into that. But, he's a one-year Badger. He was at Louisville before that. His Shrine Bowl, man, was dominant. His Shrine Bowl was dominant. And it was that way the whole week. He had a great game. And he's a big dude, 6'5", 250. I want to see what his numbers are at the combine because I think he could be one of those board risers, at least from a media perspective. He may already be pretty high up the board, or at least higher than the media is giving him credit for. Because he looks to me like he's got all the tools that you want for a young pass rusher. So he's one I'm really interested. Keep an eye on Mason Rager. All the Toledo DBs, they all look pretty good. Two of them were at the Shrine Bowl. I know the safety also is pretty good. It'll be interesting to see how those guys measure up. We mentioned Darrell Jackson, Dalen Everett. That's one of the Georgia players. So obviously we can look at data and see that Goot has an affinity for the Bulldogs. He likes to keep that G on the helmet if he can. So that was one that, he's a cornerback at Georgia. He will probably be available in the Packers drafting range. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. Another Georgia player, D lineman, Kristen Miller. He might be a little higher on boards, but we'll see. Again, he seems like a good guy. Seems like the kind of guy that the Packers would want to add to their room. Been at Georgia, had some impact on some national championship teams. Just those are the type of guys you can't ever rule out. I'm certain they're on the board. And then a couple more DBs here. Davison Igbinosun. I'm going to say it a little slower, I guess. So maybe I did better.
Just call him Davison.
Cornerback from Ohio State. He fits the mold. And then Keontae Scott from Miami is another one. He's got the size, and I think he fits the mold. Those are guys I'll be watching, and I think that if they're on the Packers' radar, they're already there. But it'll be interesting to see how they measure up at the combine and whether or not we think they'll still be there. But yeah, in general, you can't go wrong watching the cornerbacks, the D linemen, and the O linemen. Those are the ones that I think the Packers will be focused in on. I think of all of those groups that the O line has the least to gain from the combine. Maybe bench press, get an impressive bench or an impressive interview. I think if you're a good O lineman, it's going to show up on the tape. That's really where they're looking for it to show up. They're not looking at how fast your 40 split is or how much you bench. I think if you can block, and it's on the tape. That's just my opinion.
No, and the other thing about O-line too is like adjust your boards for what the Packers like, because they had been always like the athletic, not always smaller guys, but more athletic offensive linemen. Now they've gone to the bigger players. Like Anthony Belton's a huge offensive lineman. They signed Banks, right? Sean Ryan's a bigger offensive lineman. I know Jordan Morgan's not huge or anything like that, but they seem to have like shifted a little bit away from those guys who are probably
especially
better,
last season.
Yeah, away from guys who are probably better suited for like an outside zone run scheme to more of a power gap scheme, right? Like they have some big boys up front. So like it used to be like you wouldn't see them really draft guys that were like 325 plus. Well, Belton exceeds that, right? And Banks is whatever his size is now as a player, but he's big. So they will go with the bigger guys. So yeah, not that they won't take a Jordan Morgan or a Zach Tom, obviously too, but it's definitely kind of seeing a shift in what they like as far as offensive linemen go.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we'll see if they carry that on. I mean, the results from last season may not be something that they want to continue with.
Maybe they go the other way now, right?
Yeah, maybe they swing the pendulum back the other way. But yeah, that is certainly one to watch. Maybe that you look at a few more of the athletic linemen, see if the Packers target those guys versus some of the larger guys that are just there to be road graders. Again, I think you got to go to the tape. If you're looking at linemen, just go to the tape. Probably same, pretty well true for the D-line. Like you might have some measurables that you want to see how guys get off and how fast their acceleration is in 10-yard split and all that. But for the most part, you're looking at the tape. What's their technique like? What's their motor like? And probably what do they look like in the fourth quarter? Like, there's something we're seeing right now. It's like if you can get teams on the field for a long time in the third, fourth quarter, you can beat the dog out of them. And I think the Packers were guilty of that. You could see guys getting tired. They were on the field for a long time. I would watch for guys that have more stamina, that don't look like they're tired in the fourth quarter. That might be one that, at least wishful thinking, I'm hoping the Packers start targeting. But yeah, so then real quick, just a quick flyover some of the free agent news or free agent market news out there. There's always some fun stuff that people like to speculate on, but just want to, always bring a dose of reality to it. So this last week I heard Calais Campbell and Khalil Mack speculation. While both would be fun, they would be very uncharacteristic. So I don't know that I would expect anything there. Maybe Calais Campbell. Definitely, I would not think Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack can probably still command a pretty decent salary. Calais Campbell's probably just looking for vet minimum somewhere to maybe get a shot at a ring. So maybe if they love Calais Campbell, they might pull like a Mercedes Lewis type move. But I would not hold my breath on either of those two. And then, of course, Nick Chubb and Tyreek Hill released by the Dolphins. Wow. Probably more surprised by Chubb than Hill, but both probably pretty unrealistic, I think, for the Packers. I think Tyreek Hill for sure, injury issues, personality issues. Who knows what the hell kind of money that guy's asking for. Chubb is probably still getting paid a decent amount of money, and you've got your high-paid guys there. If anything, you're adding at that position, you're adding depth and young, cheap depth at that, in my opinion. I don't know. What do you think, Tim?
There's no chance Tyreek Hill. Like, he's coming off a major knee injury, which was ACL plus a dislocated knee. Plus, he's, I guess I say it nicely, he's got some issues off the field, some flags, some very huge major flags off the field.
They might be red flags.
Might be
extremely red.
Yeah, very red. There's no chance of him coming to the Packers, and that's fine. They don't need him. Chubb, I know he's a name, but he hasn't really been good for a couple of years, and he's had some injury issues. I don't think they're interested there. You mentioned Calais Campbell, Khalil Mack. Like, Calais Campbell's like 40, but he's still productive, right? And he just
had like 5 sacks last season or something like that.
Yeah, he played for Gannon last year. I don't think it would happen. Does he want to? No offense to Green, but does he want to come to Green Bay for what might be a last year's deal? Maybe he's chasing a ring. Maybe he just wants to stay in Arizona where he started his career, or somewhere warm and nice. Maybe he even retires. Who knows?
Maybe he really likes Gannon.
Maybe. I would be fine with that, but I don't expect it. Khalil Mack, I think he made $18 million on a 1-year deal last year, and he'll probably get something near that. I would think he'll probably just stay with the Chargers too. And if he's getting $18 million or even something close to that, the Packers aren't paying him that for on a contract. They can't. So unrealistic. But yeah, not to shoot them all down, but I don't see those guys. Maybe Campbell, but probably not. And then the Dolphins guys, no, that's not happening.
No, and I don't think there are free agent cornerbacks that you're going to be looking for there, unfortunately. So if you guys are hoping for a free agent cornerback, tough class for that. The draft class, though, I think has some promise. There's some depth to it. I mean, there's guys, like the guy from Arizona, Tre'Davious Stukes. He's number 104 on Dane Brugler's big board on PFF. So the guy will be around. He's thinking, into the third round. He had a 90.1 PFF grade on the season this season in 2025. That's 5th for cornerbacks in college football out of 900 plus. He's 6'2", 200 was listed at. I don't know anything about him. Haven't looked any of his tape. But a guy like that with that kind of profile just kind of makes me raise my eyes. Like, that guy's going to be available in the 3rd round? Like, okay. So, yeah, that sounds great. Because last year, the cornerback market was sparse, man. I mean, we're talking about these limitations, these thresholds. There was only a handful that were even above that threshold that we're talking about. Most of them were undersized. So when you see that, guys that are, ranked between 100 and 150 in that range, where it's like, yeah, the Packers have a few picks in that range. They can get more picks in that range if they need them. And you can see a guy like this kid coming out of Arizona who looks like he might be able to contribute year one. Okay. Well, yeah, there's reason for optimism there. This cornerback class, at least in the draft, I think is kind of very sneaky deep. It's not getting a lot of attention, I don't think. And maybe we're just not far enough into the draft season yet. But it seems like a good cornerback class, a deep cornerback class. If for a year where you hope Goot takes 2, 3, maybe even 4 guys at this position, maybe 4 is a little strong. At least 3. Let's get 3. It's a good year for that. It is. So there's optimism there for the cornerback position. I know I see some chatter about some other positions, but that's what this season's for. We're gonna go position by position. We were going to do a little bit of a flyby, I think, of the defense tonight, but we went long on some of these things, so that's fine. But do we have one more episode before the combine starts?
So it starts next week, but they actually don't do anything on the field, I think, until Thursday or Friday next week. So
we have one more episode. So maybe next week we'll do the offense and defense flyby, just kind of position by position. Here are a few names that could be within the Packers' realm of interest, right? We're not going to talk about the top of the position. We're not talking about the kid from Texas Tech getting drafted. There's those top 5, top 10 guys. They're out of the range. Packers aren't trading for them. They're not moving up there. They're not getting drafted by them. So we're just going to we don't need to spend time on it. We're going to spend time on the guys we think that the Packers will be interested in and have the ability to actually acquire. Yeah, I think next week you guys want to do some real draft nerd out. Let's do it. We're going to do that, and then we will have the scouting combine immediately after. We can break that down the following week. So thank you guys for joining us again this evening on the Pack Weekly Pod. Always fun hanging out with y'all in the comments, bringing the good stuff. Got a little insider information from Brian. Man, Brian, you got to come back and hang out with us, man. We're going to be doing it all offseason, all the draft stuff, all the draft prospects from position by position, figuring it out. So even you guys, if you're not a Packers fan, you might enjoy hanging out with us anyway. We'll flex a little bias on you, but you'll take some good information that could be valuable to your team. You just never know. And, of course, we always encourage our Packers fans to share the show. If you love us, tell a friend, bring a Packer fan, bring a cheesehead, come hang out. If you have to, bring a Bears fan, bring a Vikings fan. We'll beat up on them a little bit. We'll have some fun. And Brian Maffey says, no Fernando Mendoza talk? I don't think we're going to find time for Fernando Mendoza. Hell of a player. I don't think he's a fit. He just doesn't seem like he fits what the Packers are looking for this season.
I don't think he'll be on the board. I don't like being that he's not going to be there guy, but I don't think he'll be there when you're picking.
Yeah. 52. He won't be there, bro. They're all going to be drafted by the time Packers pick at 52. They're all going to be gone. All the players. There's
nobody's going to be there.
Nobody's left. So we're not going to be those guys. We'll be the guys in between, right? But yeah, so come back, hang out with us. We'll be talking draft, getting nerdy a little bit on it, and breaking some of these things down. If you guys had fun with us, spike that like button real quick. Only take you a second. Get on over to the YouTube, type in Packers Talk Network. Hit that subscribe button for us. That is even a bigger deal. Let's have some fun, guys. Come back, talk draft next week, and we got the scouting combine right after. So this offseason is going to fly by, and we're going to have training camp starting before you know it, and the 61st Super Bowl champions will take the field in Green Bay. All right, guys. See you next week, and as always, go